Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dr. Nicola Prendergast-Lucas, and I am the Bachelor of Psychology Program Chair and also an Assistant Professor at the University of Arizona Global Campus. And I am excited to welcome you today to this talk by Emily Frydrych called The Power of Self, an Internal Family Systems Approach to Integration and Embodied Healing. Emily Frydrych is a sociologist, educator, and writer with 2 decades of teaching experience across multiple colleges and universities. She holds a Bachelor's of Arts from the University of Michigan and a Master's of Arts from the University of Chicago, with a scholarly focus on gender, power, and social systems. Her graduate research examined dynamics of control and violence within institutional contexts. Emily has extensive professional experience in the gender-based violence and anti-violence sectors, both domestically and internationally, including work in Kathmandu, Nepal. She has also consulted with cities and counties, training professionals in communication, conflict management, human relations, training professionals in, diversity and public speaking. She brings an integrative lived perspective to her work, weaving sociological insight, trauma-informed frameworks, and embodied reflection to explore self-leadership, regulation, and resilience in everyday life. Please welcome me. This has been a long day, apologies. Please join me in welcoming Emily Frydrych.
Thank you. Thank you for the wonderful introduction. I don't know if anybody else feels when somebody reads your bio, you sound a little cooler than you think. Thank you for that. Hi, everyone. I'm Emily Frydrych, and I'm super excited to be presenting today on internal family systems. When I first heard the theme for this year's Culture of Care Summit, I knew almost immediately that I wanted to be part of it. I felt inspired and compelled to share some of the work that I've been doing. That was my core self, capital S self, nudging me to take a risk and say yes. But of course, that was not the only voice. Like all of us, I have other parts too. My anxiety chimed in, my imposter syndrome had plenty to say, and my inner critic, sometimes loud and convincing, tried to talk me out of presenting altogether. I know many of you recognize some of those voices too. Internal family systems gives us a way to understand them rather than letting those voices run the show. I chose to turn the volume down on those more fear-based parts of me and show up from capital S self to share honestly what it feels like to be in the messy middle of this work. I'm not an expert in internal family systems, and I'm also not a therapist. I'm someone who was recently introduced to this framework, and I'm actively practicing noticing what it feels like to be inside of myself and what it feels like when I'm not. I'm talking about internal family systems today in this personal, accessible way because openness is one of the ways we access self-energy. I believe that core self-energy is contagious. And my hope is that by my sharing how it shows up in my life, it'll help you recognize it in yours too. So what is this self-energy? This is when we feel aligned and grounded and present. Like all of us, I move in and out of that state every single day, multiple times a day. Today, I'm going to focus less on what pulls us away from self and more on what helps us return again and again. About 3.5 years ago, I left my marriage and began rebuilding my life very intentionally and with a lot of reflection. I didn't have a master plan. I just followed what felt right and let each insight guide the next step. That season held both a ton of freedom and also a lot of dysregulation. And that's when I found my tools. I have 4 practices that reliably help me access my capital S self. They are lifting weights, dancing, writing, and walking. These are my anchors. They bring me a lot of joy, and they make me feel a whole lot of words that begin with the letter C. They make me feel connected and clear and calm, confident, courageous, and creative. Today, I'm going to focus mostly on just one of those tools, weightlifting. For me, the gym is a portal to self-leadership. For you, it might be something totally different. This presentation is not about weightlifting. It's also not about divorce. It's about the process of losing and finding yourself over and over again. So, one image I'll return to today is a school bus. When we're inside of ourself, we're the ones driving. Our parts are still on board, but they're not grabbing the wheel. The work of internal family systems is learning to stay in the driver's seat of that bus, especially when the ride gets bumpy. So here's what we'll cover today. First, I'm going to introduce the key principles of internal family systems, which I'll now just refer to as IFS, and I'll spend some time on the concept of self. In IFS, self is understood through 8 core qualities, often called the 8 C's. I'll briefly describe each one of those and weave in my experience weightlifting to show how that practice helps me access and nourish each of those C qualities. As I talk, I invite you to stay curious about your own life, the practices that bring you closer to yourself, and the ones that pull you away. After grounding us in self and the 8 C's, I'll introduce the other parts in the IFS framework too, very briefly. Exiles and the protective parts known as managers and firefighters. When we're triggered by anything, these parts can pull us outside of self. And the goal isn't to get rid of those parts, but to help them trust the capital S self enough to be able to relax. Given our limited time today, I'll just offer a pretty brief and high-level overview of how those pieces fit together, with a focus on the larger goal, which is learning to lead ourselves and our lives from this place of capital S self. Again, I want to clarify my relationship to IFS. I am not trained as an IFS practitioner, and I'm not presenting this as a clinical account. I come to this work as a sociologist, interested in how frameworks help us make sense of lived experience. And I engage IFS as a personal reflective lens. IFS is a therapeutic model developed by Dr. Richard Schwartz in the 1980s. It views the mind as a system of parts, each with its own feelings, memories, and roles. And at the center is this capital S self, calm, curious, compassionate, and clear, the natural leader of our inner world. The model draws on family systems theory, which you might be familiar with, but it turns that lens inward, viewing each part as a member of an internal family. Rather than seeing internal conflict as pathology, IFS understands it as just normal expression of our inner complexity. And this is what IFS calls multiplicity, something we hear in everyday language when we say things like, part of me wants this, but another part doesn't. This doesn't mean that we have multiple personalities. It means that we're all carrying competing impulses and emotions and needs. IFS is also non-pathologizing. Every part has a positive intention, even when its strategies are extreme or outdated or not helpful. Healing happens when the self relates to these parts with curiosity and compassion. So the ultimate goal of IFS is self-leadership. You may remember the school bus image that I spoke about a couple minutes ago. Instead of parts grabbing the wheel, the idea is that the self should be driving, and that the managers and the firefighters and the exiles are still on board, but as passengers rather than drivers. And again, as parts learn to trust the self, they unblend and they unburden, and the system finds balance. That's the work and the magic of IFS. Just want to clarify some key terms before we get started with the 8 C's. Again, at the center of IFS is the self, our core essence, characterized by those 8 C qualities. Then we have the other parts, which fall into main categories, exiles and protectors. Exiles carry vulnerable emotions and painful memories, while protectors work to keep them safe. And protectors come in 2 forms. Managers are proactive. They try to prevent pain through things like control or planning or perfectionism. And firefighters are reactive. They respond when the pain breaks through anyway. And they use more extreme strategies like dissociation or numbing or impulsive or addictive behaviors. Blending happens when a part takes over our perspective, and unburdening is the process of releasing the pain or the beliefs that parts have been carrying. And the whole goal of IFS is self leadership, allowing the self to guide the system so that parts can relax into healthier roles. So now let's turn to the 8C qualities of self and explore how they show up for me through weightlifting. The 8Cs are calm, courage, connectedness, compassion, clarity, confidence, creativity, and curiosity. As I walk through them, I invite you to reflect on your own life, the practices or moments that help you access these same qualities. You're welcome to share reflections in the chat, and we'll leave space for conversation at the end. I'll also share a QR code with a brief reference guide and reflection worksheet that you can return to at your own pace. So the first C is connectedness. Connectedness is a sense of belonging and connection with others in the world. This might involve feeling more empathetic and connected to others or feeling part of something bigger than oneself. This first C, connectedness, shows up for me in the gym in two main ways: through community and through a deepening connection with my body. The gym was the first place in my adult life, post kids and post divorce, where I felt part of a community that truly builds one another up. It wasn't a community assigned by circumstance or convenience. It was something I chose and one that chose me back. We all want to be seen and valued and cared for, and I feel that in the gym. There are moments when I look around and I feel deep gratitude to be in a space where everyone is working through something and towards something. There's a shared energy in my gym, an unspoken understanding that we're all carrying weight in more ways than one. The trainers play a huge role in this too. They bring not just technical expertise, but presence and care and leadership. Their approach is transformative rather than transactional, and that distinction really matters. Connectedness, this first C, for me also extends inward. Through weightlifting, I've developed a new relationship with my body, one that feels present and capable and mine. Embodiment has been central to my return to self. So I want to invite you to reflect before we move on to the next C. What helps you feel connected to your body? What spaces or relationships allow you to be authentically you? Where do you feel belonging rather than pressure to fit in? The second C quality of self is creativity. Creativity is the ability to think of new ideas or solutions. Someone in self might find themselves coming up with innovative solutions to problems or finding new ways to express themselves. Through the gym and the dance floor, I have found new ways to express myself, experiment, and discover new ways of moving through whatever is unfolding in my life. Music is central to this. Blasting music while lifting weights or dancing connects me to parts of myself that could only be accessed in that way. Around the same time my marriage ended, my relationship with both the gym and the dance floor deepened, and those things arrived together. Moving my body and moving weight through my body has become a form of creative expression that is functional and positive and deeply joyful. Even preparing this presentation has felt like a creative, joyful act. And what surprised me was in the gym how practical creativity became. The gym taught me that small adjustments can change everything. A new grip, a subtle shift in posture, a slightly different stance, and suddenly the entire movement transforms. That lesson translates directly into life. Creativity allows us to experiment our way forward. The gym offers a creative outlet to express my strength and my power and my sensuality. It allows me to put motion to so much emotion. And discovering this space was itself a creative solution to a deeper problem, the feeling of being very stuck during this time in my life. So before we move on, I invite you to reflect, perhaps silently or in the chat box if you'd like, what elicits your creativity? What helps you express yourself freely? What spaces or activities or people help you generate new ideas? And on the flip side, what leaves you feeling stifled or locked up? All of the 8C qualities of self are interconnected. When we feel more connected, we can express ourselves with creativity. We're often called to step into courage, to move outside our comfort zones and to take risks. When I was wrestling with whether or not to leave my marriage, I didn't trust myself with the biggest questions, namely, should I stay or should I go? So I started smaller. I committed to the gym and I committed to building strength. For the first time, I rock climbed, I backpacked, I took solo getaways. And as I built my body differently, I began to build my life differently. Those experiences gave me a glimpse of a freer, more alive version of myself. And once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. I knew it was going to take a lot of courage to follow that. Courage isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a quiet inner voice that says, not this anymore. During that same time, I started writing a lot. It helped me move through so much of my fear and uncertainty. I couldn't see the whole path, but I trusted the feeling and I kept moving toward what made me feel free. One day in the gym, at the end of a heavy set, my trainer said, Emily, it's just pain. It will pass. It wasn't pain, it was discomfort. And like many of us, I'm pretty uncomfortable with discomfort. But in that moment, when he called me out, I learned I could stay with it. Weightlifting taught me to be less afraid of my discomfort and less deterred by it. It taught me that discomfort often means that I'm doing something hard or I'm doing something new, not that I'm doing it wrong. I used courage to build enough strength to leave my marriage. And in the gym, I used that same courage along with all my feelings to push and grunt and sweat it out. By practicing courage in these small, tiny, hard moments, I built enough trust to face the bigger decisions. I invite you to reflect again in the chat or for yourself on your own courage. Courage doesn't mean not being afraid. We're all afraid. What gives you the courage to act in spite of your fear? What helps you stay with your discomfort rather than retreat? What keeps you doubting your own ability to do hard things? The fourth C is compassion. Compassion is empathy or understanding toward oneself or others. For me, this shows up in the gym through the grace I've learned to offer myself and the understanding that progress is not always linear. I noticed recently that it took me almost a full year to be comfortable with a particular lift. That's a long time. In the past, my inner critic would have jumped in. Why is this taking so long? What is wrong with me? Why can't I do it? But what surprised me in that moment was that it wasn't the progress, it was the patience that showed up instead. And that patience has followed me beyond the gym. When we set goals and slip, many of us, myself included, spiral into shame or we give up. What I'm learning, thanks to weightlifting, is how to ease up, rebound more quickly, and respond with kindness rather than criticism. For me, that's compassion. I'm also nursing a couple injuries that I've been trying to ignore, and I'm learning that healing requires slowing down and finding that right dose of care without abandoning what I love. That is compassion too. The practice of living the C qualities in real time is always ongoing. My commitment to weightlifting and nutrition is a high priority. When I'm out dancing while others on the dance floor are fueling with cocktails all night, I'm stashing protein bars and electrolyte pockets in my boots or my pockets. And this supports my lifting. It makes me feel good. Feeling good matters. I like feeling good. Choosing what nourishes my body and what nourishes my strength is an act of self-compassion. It's a way of honoring myself. Some ideas for you to consider as I move through and we go to the next C is what brings out your softness and your tenderness. Think about what people in your life or what spaces in your life invite patience and grace in you. And on the flip side, what situations make you feel defensive or like you're on edge? The fifth C of self is curiosity. Curiosity is a non-judgmental interest in oneself or the world. For me, curiosity began with honest questions about what does and doesn't make me feel good. Curiosity becomes more accessible when we're grounded in that compassion that we talked about and when we feel more connected, which I already talked about too. Weightlifting began alongside a structured approach to nutrition. My eating is intentional, and while it's not always flexible, it started from a place of real curiosity. I experimented with what I put in my body, and I paid attention to how it affected me. I noticed what supported my strength and what didn't. Research begins with a question, and I was genuinely curious. Again, for me, it's not about restriction. It's about understanding how different inputs affect my body and finding a balance that supports both strength and enjoyment. Beyond nutrition, the gym and the dance floor are spaces where I return to that capital S self and stay curious about what's happening internally. When emotions surface, I ask what they're trying to tell me. Through movement, I gather information from the inside. As adults, so many of us are subtly discouraged from following our curiosity. There's so much pressure out there that tells us we're supposed to have things figured out by now. But one of the coolest parts of being a grown-up is that we actually don't have to follow a predetermined script. We get to keep exploring. So I'll leave you with just two questions for this C. What are you curious about doing differently in your life? And what shuts that curiosity down? Calm is the sixth C of self. Calm is a state of peace and tranquility. It becomes more accessible when we're connected to qualities like compassion and connectedness. Weightlifting is one of the places where I access calm most naturally. Definitely energizes me, but it also really helps me decompress. When I lift weights, I often close my eyes and drop into my body. That's where calm lives for me, when the overthinking parts quiet down. One day during reverse lat flies, I was overanalyzing the movement. The harder I tried to figure it out, the worse it got. I just couldn't stop focusing on my arms and the trajectory and all the things. So I softened, I closed my eyes, and I stopped thinking and I just let my body lead. What surprised me most was realizing that calm isn't passive. It's focused, intentional presence. When the volume of my parts turns down, everything else feels more fluid. Weightlifting has also taught me that calm is where growth happens. All that effort at the gym, the pushing and the pulling and the bracing, that's just a stimulus. But the growth actually happens later in the rest. Calm is what allows us to integrate and expand. Because I lift heavy, I rest often between sets, and I've stopped shaming myself for that. I was looking around at the beginning, wondering why I was resting so much longer than everybody else. But those pauses have made me less reactive, both under the physical weight and outside the gym in overwhelming moments of my life. Everything has an edge, though, right? Sometimes I stay in the pause too long, holding tension and losing the ability to move forward. Sometimes, instead of pausing between sets, I pause between reps. I just stand there under the bar, not doing anything, but burning energy nonetheless. I did that in my marriage too, staying in the question, should I stay or should I go, far past what was sustainable. Eventually, the exhaustion forced movement. So now I know when I'm ready to move, move. Outside the gym, I've created spaces of calm as well, places where I can step out of urgency. I know urgency is a very common thing that a lot of us feel. I've created spaces where I could step out of that and return to myself. Calm has taught me to pause before reacting, to reflect before responding. When I react, my parts are driving the bus. When I respond, I'm inside of self. So I encourage you to think about what brings you a sense of peace and calm in your life. And we're all overwhelmed all the time, multiple times a day. What helps you return back from that overwhelm? We're now at the seventh C. Remember, there are 8 of them. The seventh C of self is clarity. Clarity is clear-mindedness and understanding. Often we can't access qualities like confidence or calm until we first have clarity. For a long time, I was asking myself big questions about the kind of life that allows me to thrive. That inquiry, that data collection helped me develop a clearer internal map for what to do with what I was learning. I mentioned earlier the solo getaways that I took. Those experiences made it clear that life could feel different. It became clear that weightlifting doesn't just fill me, it fuels me. When we move toward what brings us into our best self, clarity emerges. And with that, a greater sense of freedom. We're now at the final C, and that is confidence, a sense of self assuredness and self esteem. By now, you can see how all the C's are interrelated. The confidence I began feeling was a direct result of showing up for myself physically. My body was changing, which was fun, but more importantly, the gym became a testing ground. What did it feel like to believe I couldn't do something and then watch myself do it? Every effort expanded my sense of capability. My confidence grew steadily, 1 rep at a time. I'm moving a little quickly through some of these because I realize we're coming up on the end. Um, I've covered the 8 C's of self, but in order to get a complete picture of IFS, we have to understand those other parts. And I was going to originally walk through each one in detail, but I just want to show you what they feel like with one brief snapshot. I remember a moment at the gym. I finished a heavy set. I shook my head. I said out loud, that rep was trash. I was pretty defeated. In that moment, 3 parts showed up. Exiles hold pain and vulnerable emotions, things like shame and fear and loneliness. Managers try to prevent that pain through things like control and pressure and perfectionism. Firefighters react when pain breaks through things like distracting or numbing or shutting things down. That rep was trash. The part that felt small and ashamed, that was one of my exiles. The part that piled on pressure and self-criticism, those are managers. And the part that wanted to escape the feeling and just walk out the door, that was a firefighter. These parts look different, but they share the same job, protecting our most vulnerable places. And I felt all 3 in that single rep. I expected my trainer to agree and say, yep, rep was trash. But instead, he smiled and he said, great, it's supposed to go to trash. When we're building strength, we push to fatigue, and fatigue can sometimes feel like failure. But I've learned that when things feel hard, it doesn't mean I'm broken. Some things are supposed to go to trash if I'm growing. But in those moments when an exile gets activated, everything shifts. The confidence that I spoke about a couple minutes ago drops. The clarity that I talked about gets all muddied. Managers get loud, firefighters react, my parts take the wheel. And that's why capital S self matters. The goal, again, isn't to get rid of our parts, it's to lead them. It's to meet those parts with curiosity and compassion and to stay in the driver's seat. So, what's the ultimate goal of IFS? The goal is self leadership, a system where our parts trust the self enough to step out of our extreme roles. I know we're coming up on time, so I'm just going a little quicker here. If you're wondering how to move closer to your own core self energy, there are pathways towards becoming more self led. A lot of them are being covered in this summit this week. These are practices, they're not one and done solutions. And the process becomes clearer over time. And if you think of it like lifting weights, it's not something you get once, it's a practice that you do over and over and over. For me, returning to self looks like a long training cycle. Connecting, getting pulled off under stress, correcting, and finding my way back over and over. That's not failure, that's the work. Just like in the gym, you show up, you lose form, you rebrace, and you get back under the bar. Connect, lose it, recenter, and repeat over and over. I hope that today's mini presentation on IFS has given you some momentum, not toward a specific outcome, but toward noticing the spaces or the practices or the moments that help you access your capital S self and move towards wellness, however you define it. The path towards wellness becomes easier and more meaningful when we understand what it feels like to be inside of ourselves and when we have language for the qualities that live there. Those 8 C's that I covered today, they offer a map, not a checklist or a standard, but a way to orient toward alignment in real time. In this framework, self-care isn't about perfection or optimization. It's about returning again and again to what helps regulate and ground and reconnect you to your core self energy. It's noticing when you're pulled away and gently choosing your way back. So if you'd like to explore IFS further, I've included a few resources that I recommend, and I'll also share a QR code with the brief 8C reference guide, as well as a reflection worksheet that you can return to at any time. And here's that QR code if you'd like. And I just want to thank you all for being here. Unfortunately, I cannot see the chat box at all while I'm
Oh,
presenting. So I'm going
let
to
me.
rely on you. I know that I asked you all to share some reflections, and I hope that you
Okay,
are
I
monitoring,
will
but I can't see
happily let me
it.
go through this for you. Okay,
I'm
so
going to stop sharing and then I will. Hang on. Does anybody need the QR code up?
some people just said that, my lack of sharing is due to the fact that these are big questions, and most people don't immediately have answers, and others agreed with that. However, um, we do have one, Dr. Jennifer Myers, who shared that as someone who has just reset and starting a new job and embarking on my own self-care health journey, I appreciate this comparison of journeys and how our physical and mental health is so intertwined.
I think more intertwined than we think about. We typically think, oh, I'm going to go do this exercise for weight control or building strength or whatever, and I'm going to do yoga and meditation over here for my emotional well-being, but it's all integrated, right? It's all connected.
And then we also have comments that Marie shared that calm is not passive, and that her managers are out of control.
As are mine. Were you able to identify any particular managers that come up for you?
Marie, are you still here? She is here somewhere. Yes. Marie Henderson, do you feel like sharing?
Sure. I was particularly, I think it was the last sentence of the description where managers are the ones that are perfectionism and it's not good enough and
Yeah.
that sense of the explanation of managers, I have to put them in their place frequently.
And they're loud and bossy.
Yes, they are.
Yes, I share the perfectionism and the self-critic manager for sure. I also get activated into like the planning mode where I think if I plan everything and I can control everything, it's all gonna prevent all the problems. It doesn't, obviously, but our minds trick us.
Lily Mai shared that rest should not be a reward, it should be a requirement, something I still need to remind myself of regularly to avoid feeling guilty about resting.
Yeah. I think in our hustle culture, we're all shamed out of not producing, right? If we're not producing, if we're not doing, if we're not achieving, then we're lazy, we're checked out, we're whatever the messages are. And we forget that we actually need that rest to reboot and reset. And also, it just feels good, right? Resting feels good, even if it's not making us stronger, which it is. But it just feels good, and feeling good is important too.
And then we have many lovely thank yous, and also from Marie Henderson, thank you for this reminder of how important self-care is. We need to be intentional with our care.
Agreed. Thank you for those great comments.
Yeah, those were all really lovely. So a big thank you to Emily Frydrych
Oh,
for
I'm sorry,
your
one more
time.
at the end, Emily. Says
We
that
have more.
the QR code isn't working.
Oh,
I
was
wonder
anybody
if
able to open it?
let me maybe you could put it up again and we can give it a try, and then if not, maybe you could work on it before we get it posted.
Let's see. I had some problems sharing my screen
Oh,
and
somebody else tried and they said they were able to open it.
were able.
Yes, they were. So
Oh,
maybe it was
Are
an
you able
let
to see
me
that now?
yeah, let me see if
Okay.
it works for me.
yes.
Maybe you could try it again, uh, Avisha. Yeah, it did open for me as well. So I could share it with you, Avisha, if you can't grab it. Awesome. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
Not
No
at
worries.
all.
I also want to note that if you enjoyed this session, then please share your love in the chat. There is, um, well, there's a big post with a couple of links in there. And with those links, you can vote on your favorite presentations that you've seen over the course of the uh, Culture of Care Summit. We have two awards that are being presented. One is the Clifford Blizzard uh, Award, and the other one is a UAGC Wellness Warrior Award. So be sure to cast your votes. That concludes the workshop, The Power of Self and Internal Family Systems Approach to Integration and Embodied Healing. Thank you to all of our attendees for joining us. We hope you found this workshop renewing, and another thank you again to Emily Frydrych. Thank you so much.
Thank you all for being here.